We are recording as of right now. I just want to make sure we've had some preliminary chat. I'm talking with flutist Deborah Silvert, flute, alto flute, piccolo, and a very interesting instrument. I don't want to give it away just yet. We're going to talk about that you have a special relationship with, and guitarist Paul Bowman. We're speaking more or less. We're going to talk about a lot of things, very important things, I think, anyway, about your lives, about what this whole thing is that you have just reinitiated, maybe I can say. We're talking about the Duo Sequenza. We're looking at Duo Sequenza here. Again, flutist Deborah Silver, guitarist Paul Bowman. The CD is a 2019 Navona Records release, and they are so wonderful. I'll put up on my website, performingartsreview.net, all the links to buy the CD, to read the program notes. I mean, Navona's really, really good about that. The album is called Yes, It's a Thing! Exclamation point. And when you see the CD title, cover, everybody, you'll understand. Yes, it's a thing, all right. And it took me a long time. In fact, I think, Deborah, you had to coach me over one of our previous telephone calls before I finally saw that what this thing was on the CDs. Okay, let's a little bit of background. Flutist Deborah Silver founded Duo Sequenza with guitarist Paul Bowman in 1988. And there's a little dot, dot, dot. There's things we're going to talk about the ups and downs of career and family and intercessions and whatever stuff that happens. Deborah, taught flute from 94 to 99 at Valparaiso. I'm supposed to say Valparaiso, Indiana University, not Valparaiso. Valparaiso, Indiana University. Paul, you received your master's degree in guitar from Manhattan School of Music, and you are working at finishing your DMA, if I understand correctly, at UC San Diego. And we'll talk about that a little bit, about dissertations and recitals that are all those requirements about the DMA that basically let a whole lot of people go, maybe next lifetime, you know. So anyway, those are the people I'm talking to. Because it's just a question that I have lots and lots and lots of musicians, professional musicians and amateur musicians and friends and neighbors and all the rest of it out there. But all of us, myself included, we all want to know what it is, because we all know what it was for ourselves. But what was the moment? Let's start with Deborah. What was it? When? How old were you when all of a sudden it was like flute? Bingo! Go.
I didn't really want to play the flute. I wanted to play the harp. The harp, that was what I wanted to play. But when we started instruments, I was only in second grade in my particular school system. The harp was completely out of the question. Very, very expensive. They weren't even offering it anyway. But the shiny flute, that shiny thing. I wanted to play the shiny thing.
Oh, that thing. Go ahead, sorry.
That thing, the shiny one. And so I was a pretty challenging child, and I insisted my mom buy that flute. The other kids the parents were renting it. We were second graders. What did we know? But I wanted to own it, and I insisted that she buy it. It was probably a very good thing, because I don't know if I ever really would have gotten back to it, because in the second grade I lasted for all of 6 weeks, and and that was the end of that. And
also, then the flute kind of went into the front closet, and
yeah, it did.
yeah.
It came out periodically, and I would mess around with it, but I had no clue what I was doing. And when I started running away from home, I was a juvenile delinquent. When I started running away from home, I took the flute with me.
Stop. She very casually just mentioned that, and I knew this, but I think we're going to Deborah, Paul, if you can wait for just a moment, let's do this one. Then we'll talk about Paul and his problems. But you and I have spoken, Deborah, about this, and what we're going to be getting at here is that you luckily had that flute with you, that you were shall we say, kind of maybe a problematic kid or something. You ran away from home, you were unhappy of whatever circumstances. We don't need to go with that one, but that flute was there, and tell all of us about it. That instrument was an anchor, was a savior. What?
I think I was going to pawn it. Honestly, I think.
Thanks. You just shattered my whole fantasy.
But fortunately, Fortunately, I after running away 3 times, and I ran long distance.
We're talking 14, 15 years old.
15, yeah,
15.
15 years old. I finally got into a foster home, and the foster family was musical. So they were very fond of me. I was very fond of them. They wanted to pay for private lessons for me, and they set me up with an excellent teacher. And I just took off
Wow.
like a shot. Yeah.
Wow.
I had nothing else to do. I had to switch schools. That's very hard to do at
Oh,
15.
sure.
I knew no one in the new school. So,
Were you in a small
really, what I
town?
did with my time, I practiced. I practiced.
Were you in a small town or a large town? Where were you?
These were suburbs of Buffalo, New York.
Suburbs of Buffalo. Yeah.
Yeah, suburbs of Buffalo. I went from one suburb to a different suburb. But I
And
actually studied the first teacher I had was Cheryl Gabetti. She's since passed away. She was a flutist with the Buffalo Philharmonic at the time, and so I had an excellent.
Well, that's wonderful. You got lucky. Paul, what happened? Any good news, bad news? What? When was the first sort of thing that made guitar suddenly speak to you as your
Mhm.
special instrument?
Yeah, growing up in this area, we have the Indiana Dunes, which is a beautiful natural playground where people go and scale the really large sand dunes and swim in Lake Michigan in the summer. And it's a national park now. So growing up there, bonfires and beer keggers with friends. Bring the guitar
There you
and
go.
first 11, 12 played and then school in my small town was the outlet for my musical endeavors. We had a great music director and had a jazz band, and I excelled initially with the jazz guitar. And it wasn't until I was 14 or 15 or so that I saw Andre Segovia in Chicago, downtown Chicago.
That'll do it.
That really turned me around. And then the catharsis for me was, again, when I was 16, I had a diving accident where I broke the fifth cervical vertebrae almost all the way through up to a millimeter, and I could have been quadriplegic. So I certainly took music very seriously after that. And so I was going along parallel tracks with jazz guitar. We had a great jazz big band in my high school, and we used to compete in festivals, and I would go and win Best Soloist Awards. But at the same time, I was working on classical. I would take lessons in Chicago, get on the South Shore train, which is, we'll talk about the South
that.
I
Shore
was going to say, we're going to talk about
train.
South Shore.
And it's an electric commuter train that connects South Bend to Chicago. And from my home in the Dunes, I went on most Saturdays, I'd go study with Richard Pick. Richard Pick in Chicago was the mafioso of guitar. He would write in his method book. He had his own method books. He insisted you do everything in his way. And he wrote in his book, save for the right hand thumb, "That's the boss," and he said it in a gangster kind of style. And
Play this right or I'll whack you.
yeah, I play it with the thumb, or he's the boss here. And so, but no, Richard Pick, very, very respectable guitarist, perhaps a bit arrogant. There are stories about him, but in any case, his students have gone on and are professors for guitar, have been many years at Northwestern University, for instance, and at DePaul University. Those are his pupils from the 70s, whenever it was that I studied. They're about my age. So, but in any case, as I went to jazz school in Berklee School of Music in Boston, and was one of 700 guitar majors. So that didn't last long. I just stayed 3 semesters, and I kept advancing on the classical guitar. And after a while, I pushed the jazz guitar in the corner and just focused on the classical. and got accepted at the Manhattan School of Music. And so then
that ain't bad.
yeah, it was really hard work initially. As Deborah can attest to, when you're first learning, you have so much that for me, growing up in this area in Indiana, I initially never had any guitar teachers until I started taking lessons in Chicago, and so there's just so much to learn, and so I was
And maybe even just to speak about being self-taught at a certain level, maybe even both of you fooling around with the flute or playing with the guitar. At a certain point, you make the decision, and then the hard stuff begins. You have to have people tell you how to unlearn certain things,
Yeah,
certain bad
yeah,
things that you
it's
know.
true, absolutely.
I just remembered a funny little thing. I remember at one point early on that my goal was to be a mediocre flutist. I just wanted to play well enough to be sort of
That
mediocre.
sounds like me in clarinet, actually. I just wanted to be a second clarinetist. I was happy in that mid range. I didn't want any of that high difficult stuff. Yeah. Well, that's that. There are things to be said about about choosing mediocrity, as it were. Well, let's skip the subject ahead a couple ticks and look at Sequenza. When did you two meet each other? How did it begin? Stuff like that. I mean, go. Who
Well,
wants to
I
start?
I, I moved back from New York in '88. I was in New York for about 8 years. 5 of them were at Manhattan School, where I got the bachelor's and master's in classical guitar, and then the 3 were, the struggle of living in New York and was very difficult. And certainly I had music jobs, and I got to play in new music ensembles that through contacts I developed at Manhattan School of Music. But in any case, I was floundering. It just wasn't productive enough for me, and it was a struggle to survive. So I moved, back home, the proverbial prodigal son returning home, and
Oh yeah,
my
all of this is
parents.
way too familiar for me. Go ahead.
Yeah, parents weren't too enthused, but so Deborah and I we met. I'm not sure how I found her
You
contact
found
number.
me. Yeah, you were
I
he was asking around, and I had just, I think in
maybe
'87
I asked
gotten onto
Phil
the.
Molinar
Oh,
Music.
maybe.
There was a local
Yeah, there was
music
a local
store,
music
and I
store.
asked,
Could have been.
"Hey, is there a flute player?" And then they gave me your name. So
Yeah,
Now, where was?
I had gotten on the
88,
Indiana
1988.
Okay,
88
and what town was this again? This is part of
This
what I'm.
was
Valparaiso,
Okay, so
right
a
here.
small city,
right
right?
here. Yeah,
Valparaiso is
Just
a
yeah.
small town.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah.
so let me see if I understand this right, because it becomes, in my mind, even more interesting to me. Uh, let me see if I get this right. Paul, enough of this big city stuff. I can't make a living. You know what I mean? It's tough. Rent is impossible. I'm gonna go home and chill for a bit. You come home to
Mm.
Valparaiso. Stop me when I'm wrong. And you get a little itch, something. Maybe is there anybody maybe I can make some music with? And you start asking around town. Is there a
Mm.
flutist? Am I close?
Yeah, it was probably the one of the first impulses actually because um,
You worked a lot with flute in New York,
I
didn't you?
worked a lot with flute, and I just I don't know. I knew that there was a duo type of duo that I wanted to form and find. You know, you always, if you're from a new place and you're coming back, you always want to find out who's around and who the players are, and that's what I did, and I found her. But I lived in a town called. I grew up in a town called Chesterton, which is just about 12 miles north of Valparaiso. Chesterton is on Lake Michigan, and Valparaiso is
A
just
little further
south.
south. Yeah.
It's in the same county. It's just the middle of the county, and I grew up in the north part of the county. But in any case, yeah, that's where my parents lived, and they let me back. Tail between the legs kind of thing. But no,
Oh yes, I
I was
remember.
able
I
to.
know these things. I know of these things.
Yeah, but it was
Thank
very
God for parents.
productive.
You know?
Yeah, I know. It was
What
very,
what's
very
the
productive for us initially because uh, I wasn't, I mean, it wasn't like, okay, you're home and go get a job, buddy. You know, my parents weren't as insistent on that as,
Right.
so my
that's
job
nice.
initially with her, uh, I would spend days and days, day after day, 10 hours, 12 hours at her house. We would rehearse, we would do bookings, we would promote
That's
The
old
old-fashioned way.
fashioned
that's
way
how it works, all right. Yeah.
with a word processor and sending, a whole bunch of paper resumes and
Brochures,
brochures and
bulk mailing.
bulk
All
mailing
that
and
cost, all that incredible
stuffing
cost. Yeah.
envelopes. And I did that when I lived in New York. I worked for several new music groups that had non-for-profit status, and they would get the bulk mailing, and I helped work in the office, so I was pretty familiar with this kind of work. But in the old days, you would get a list from, say, Arts Midwest. You would get a list of presenters. I mean, it would be a thick on that old computer paper that used to come out
With the holes on the
with the
side.
Yeah.
holes
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the side, the perforated holes. And so you would get like a list of who the contact people at colleges, universities. This was before College Music Society like got their act together and started publishing, for jobs. But those are for teaching jobs at College Music Society. But they do publish a big index of universities with music programs and list all the faculty and what music they've had. But in any case, this was old-fashioned,
Well, let me
shoe
jump
leather
in.
call, follow-up, phone call,
Yeah.
the old way of trying to book.
Let me
And
just
so we booked our own tours,
let me
basically.
jump in, which is that it sounds like we're talking about 100 years ago, and it was only maybe 20. And believe me, I'm an administrator. I've been doing this all my life too, putting together the mailing list. Now I just do email lists. I don't bother with the rest of
Yeah,
it
there's no such thing. I mean,
anymore. There's no point at all. But I remember well those
we're
times.
processor.
But let me ask this question. I'm having this fantasy. I have no idea what Valparaiso looks like, but I'm imagining a little Midwestern, charming little Midwestern, very quiet little
There's
town.
a famous Lutheran
There's a
university here.
university
Oh,
here.
It's
oh,
sort of a Hochburg of Lutheran academia is right here in this
makes
town.
it makes sense being in Indiana too. The Lutherans, the various immigrations and so.
Yeah, I mean it's great too. There are a bunch of Germans here, and since I live in Germany, I seek them out and I try to, have conversations
But
with them.
what I want to know is so what I'm imagining is so Deborah's walking down the main street or something, minding her own business, doing a little window shopping, and somebody says, "Hey, somebody wants to talk to you about." I mean, what? Were you actually also kind of looking to see? We're talking about 1988, right? We're in '88.
Right.
I
I
dropped
was
out of the
on
blue.
I was, yeah,
Just
I
came
think
out
he
of the blue.
called me. I think he telephoned me. I was on at the time, the State Arts Commission, Indiana Arts Commission, and many of the other states had a presenter touring roster.
Sure. Yep.
Like there was a juried, artist roster.
Yep.
And so I was on that artist roster, and I was just doing solo recitals. And I didn't even know that flute and classical guitar was a thing. I didn't know that was a thing.
See,
I mean,
now you know where yes, it's a thing.
I was, I was trained for chamber
30
music.
years later.
Right, exactly. I was
yes,
trained for chamber music, but I was very into woodwind quintet, and I was very into flute and piano, and sonata duos, and that's what I was doing. I was a little more traditional. I wasn't doing as much new music. I was doing like, kind of the entire
Wow, or something.
yeah, I mean everything from, all the way back to Marin Murray, all the way up to, contemporary stuff. Uchinsky was still living at the time, and Density, Varese, different things like that. But I think I got the call out of the blue. I mean, I remember
It was,
I remember it as being a phone call, and he said it was so interesting because he says he introduced himself. He said he was a classical guitarist. Wondered whether I might be interested in forming a flute and classical guitar duo with him. He says, I know you don't know me, but I grew up in Chesterton. I have my bachelor's and master's from the Manhattan School, and I have a personal letter of recommendation from Lucas Foss, and also from
drop a name or two.
Yeah, just drop a name or two. Elliot Carter.
Charles Warren.
Yeah, Charles Warren and Roger Reynolds. Just some small names.
Yeah.
And I thought, boy, and he wants to play with me, But I had long left the mediocrity behind. I'd been doing a lot of young artist competitions and things until I got too old for those. And then, I took it. I just took it. I just kept on that path of 4 to 5. I started practicing 4 to 5 hours a day, and I just never stopped. So.
Boy, and that's what's required. I mean, no
kidding.
Yeah. That really is what's required.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So there you go. So you have your first rehearsal, two strangers.
Rehearsal, and I remember what we did.
We had
worked
a concert like in
January 89. 6 weeks later.
6 weeks
I think
we had our first concert. We planned, yeah.
But the first pieces he brought Robert Beezer's Il est né, Le Devant Enfant, and he also brought Joan Towers' Snow Dreams, which he had done. I don't even think it had been published when Paul did it.
Yeah, I had notes, Joan Towers, personal notes. She wrote it for my teacher, who was Sharon Isbin. She wrote it for her and Carol Winsence.
And Carol, of course, she's from Buffalo originally. Carol Winsence is, and she also studied. Yeah, very small world. She studied also with my first teacher, Cheryl Gapetti. Was one of her early teachers. Yeah.
Okay, so you got together. I'm trying to get this story clear. That you got together. You played some concerts. Now what happened? Or did it? Am I incorrect? The things stopped at a certain point. Yes, there has been a gap, right? Tell me about it.
There was a gap.
What happened? Why? And the gap, because I think most of us are going to say, oh yeah,
that happened.
Who wants to start?
Well, it was Paul married this opera singer.
Oh, that'll do it every time.
Yeah, every time. And she got a job at an opera house in Germany. And so he followed her over there. But at the same time, my husband and I had adopted one child, a son, and he was actually going on tour with us,
Nice.
probably the first 14 months of his life. But then we adopted a second child, my oldest daughter, and she had special needs, lots of intense special needs. And so that was very concurrent with his getting married and moving. It just kind of
makes perfect sense. You both had your.
Keep happening. We had some concerts on the books and we just split them. He took what he could finish up. I took what I could manage, because we just couldn't keep going.
So things started 88, 89. Things are starting to cook and percolate.
And they wound down in 93. 93 was.
Wow, so it just almost began to take flight, and then things happen. Somebody gets married and goes off to Germany. Something happens about your children and special needs and needing to become a mom. Okay, so there's all that, and all those years go by. Did you correspond with each other? Was there any?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I don't know why we didn't. It wasn't. I don't remember feeling animosity or anything. I think
we just lost touch.
I mean,
I was at Paul's wedding. I remember the wedding.
Yeah.
And I
93.
And then I heard, I heard that they were moving to Germany, and I think we might have. I don't remember specifically. I think we might have talked or gotten together. We weren't going to try to do anything as a duo. You couldn't book it. I mean, we could, we just didn't know what we were doing. With my two little kids and the one having special needs, it was just, not good.
It's called too much.
Yeah, it was just too much. And I don't know. And part of it for me, it was very painful. I didn't get the university teaching job until 95. And so that was good for me as an art, I had that artistic outlet. I was able to do faculty recitals, and I did. I generally would do one solo faculty recital and then a couple chamber music recitals with other faculty members per year. I was maybe doing 3 a year, which was way down from the 15 or 20 that we used to do way back when. and that went until 99. So it was satisfying, but yet I had a really heavy teaching load and I had my kids at home and I wasn't able to practice that 4 to 5 hours a day like I loved to do. And I don't know, Paul and I just lost touch. I mean, there were a couple times that I thought to Google him, once the internet became a thing. And I don't know that I ever found him out there. I think I might have found a YouTube video once. I'm not sure. And yeah.
So it's all gone. It's all gone. You figured nothing. But maybe both of you are you're just not even thinking in terms of getting back together. What brought you back together?
That wasn't even that wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a thought. In fact, when we remodeled, I wasn't even teaching after 1999 when I left the university. I was just too busy with my family. And my husband, when we were remodeling a part of the house that we're in now, he wanted to build a music room. And I said, boy, that seems kind of silly. I don't, what do I need a music room for? I don't even practice anymore. I'm not teaching. He said, no, you need to have a music room. So he built a music room. It's not really huge. But maybe he was a little, prescient too, that he feeling that maybe I'd come back. But in 2014, the flute convention, we have a National Flute Association, and every year they have a big convention, and it was held in Chicago in 2014. So because it was in Chicago, I thought, oh, I really want to go. So my husband says, well, go. You should go.
I mean, I built you a music room. Go.
Right. Right. Exactly. He's always been very supportive. Well, I felt awkward even reaching out to any of my flutist colleagues because I'd been out of that world for so long. It just, 14 years, no one had seen or heard from me. And so I just asked them to set me up with a roommate, and they set me up with a wonderful Dutch flutist that was premiering some Catherine Hoover works at the convention. And her name is Vendela Wensual, and she teaches now at the Cordoba Conservatory in Spain. And she and I became very good friends. It turned out that we have the same flute maker, and we have the same fondness for Catherine Hoover, so no accidents. And I was very shy. We brought both of our flutes from our common maker, and she wanted to play mine. Mine was a very early flute. It was number 108. And she had a 600 and something flute. And so she wanted to play 108 to see what it was like. And then she encouraged me to play her flute. And I was embarrassed because I hadn't been practicing and I didn't know what I was going to sound like. And she just insisted. So I picked it up and I played. And she said, oh, you are wonderful. Why are you not playing? This is ridiculous. So she nudged me. And if it had not been for that nudge from her, because I think she's quite a great player,
but also the nudge from your husband.
Nudge from my husband, nudge from Vendela. And then when I came home, I said to my husband, Paul, I said, I think I want to play again. And he says, well, you should play. And I said, well, I don't have anybody to play with. And he said, call Paul. And I said, I haven't talked to Paul or spoken to Paul in 21 years. And he said, Google him.
You know what? I
Googled him, and I found an email address, and I emailed him.
I have heard some wonderful stories about supportive partners.
Yeah, that's great.
And this is definitely one of them. A husband that first of all builds you a music room, even when you were saying, I don't know if it's good. Okay, and then sends you, really says, hey, there's this convention, you really want to go? Go. And then
it's a real mensch, what we say.
He's a mensch.
Fabulous. Your husband must be a fabulous person. Okay, so you get together, you compare notes, you do all the history, you talk about all the good times and the bad times, and then what? How does this, and what is the year? I'm trying to get a little focus on.
So convention was in August 2014. So the communication between Paul and I by email was, yeah, let's put it back together. And so then we sort of talked, that fall, through what we would do. And January of 2015, he showed up at my house for our first rehearsal week. And then he booked a concert for us already in March.
That's right, I did in March, right.
Was that in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I was living in North Carolina
at
the time. in the mountains. Well, not quite in the foothills, and I booked a box lunch. Was
It
it
was a box lunch
called
hour.
a
Yeah,
box?
box lunch hour. Yeah,
Not BOX, but BACH.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
Box.
box. Uh-huh.
Box lunch. And she came out, and I mean, we did old standbys. Well,
Hmm.
we did get a good YouTube recording. I feel pretty good of a piece that Easley Blackwood wrote for us, and I recorded it on video, but it was a very very good first concert, and so it was encouraging. So we said let's see what else comes up, and
So let's compare
so.
notes about then and then, which is to say, in the beginning, the 80s, you're sealing envelopes, you're putting stamps on things, you're developing lists, you're doing all that nightmare. Okay, so then in the new life, you both had that experience. Is very important. When you sat down and said, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to commit to this. It was 2016, yeah, something 14, 16.
15.
So then what did you say? Oh, and we have the expertise now. We'll create a database. We'll do or what? Or was it the same?
No, no, that was a problem. That was huge. There was a huge learning curve for me. Now, Paul never left, he never left music, so I had to get my playing back up too. My chops had to come back to where they had been. They were, even though we played that first concert in March, I wasn't at all confident that I could pull it off. I didn't know if I was going to get stage fright after all those years
Sure.
or, what would happen. And even though musically I knew those pieces, the ones that we did, I knew them inside out. Musically, it was there, it was all in my head, but getting my fingers to work and getting all of this to work, I didn't know how that was going to be under pressure. It was scary for me that
It
first
is
concert.
scary. I've been there also as a conductor. Knew very well the piece. It was a silly thing, a college orchestra rehearsal or something, nothing
Oh yeah.
big. And I was terrified. And by the
Yeah.
time, because it had been a couple, 3, 4 years since I had conducted even a concert band sort of situation, and luckily I got the wrong day. The band room was shut up. But I mean, I had worked myself up into an absolute like nervous wreck.
Yeah.
So believe me. And
Yeah.
by the way, we our anecdotes are not alone, right? Everybody out there watching this, we've all been there. In the
Yep.
audiences, those
Yep.
terrifying moments when you just don't feel quite confident. Okay, but you got through that.
Mhm.
Get through it. And, I took, for me, I gave myself permission to fail, right before I thought, what's the worst thing that could happen? I get up there and I blow it. Like I choke and I can't play at all. What will I do? At that point, I'll stop and I'll say, Paul was always very fond. He doesn't even remember this, but he was also he was very fond of saying in the early days, he'd say, ha, don't worry about it. It's classical music. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Ah, that's a good one. I must remember that.
So yes, so I said to myself, if I blow it and I have to stop, we're just going to restart, and I'm going to make that comment. I'm going to say, well, Paul always said it's classical music. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So we're just going to start again,
Yeah,
and then we start again. But it didn't happen. Everything was fine. It was good for a first concert. It
It
really
was.
was.
okay,
It
now I'm
was
going to have to skip ahead a little bit because I can see I'm starting to run out of time. I don't want to go too long, although I have come to the conclusion people watch, they drift away, they can not watch at all, whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you and I have our wonderful talk. So time is not so important, but I'm trying to guide it a little bit. We need to talk about the CD.
sure.
Okay? Once more, Duo Sequenza. Yes, dot, dot, dot. It's a thing. This is world premiere recording of new music for flute and classical guitar. Let me just mention the composers. David Noon, Jerry Owen, Mark Mellitz, Amin Sharifi, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Jorge Muniz, is it Muniz with an I, Z, I guess? Anyway,
Muñez. Muñez.
Muniz,
Moons.
Muniz, yeah.
Mhm.
And so let me just give you my little critique, verbal critique, and then later, as you know, I'm going to review the CD. But it's a wonderful and very accessible CD of flute guitar repertoire. Some really marvelous pieces, and I know that you two have been busy. You are, this is part of your whole process, recording new music. I want to talk about something very important, but let's first about maybe the next CD, possibly we'll talk. Anyway, so it's a really very accessible CD. But what I want to really put out, this is like it put out is this is the first CD of the duo, right? Since way or even ever. Is this ever the first ever?
Well, it's the first commercial release for sure. It's the
Yeah.
first CD for sure. We did do an album back in, I think, 1990. I'm not sure.
You mean
but it
that
was on cassette tape.
one of those things that spin and you put a needle in it and it, okay.
Well, it's the old reel-to-reel tape, and
Ah,
where the guy
Yeah.
with his slicing
yeah.
razor blade slice the tape just right and spinning the dial.
You know, it's like
There was those
let's
good
not
old
go there. It was too long ago.
It was a long time ago.
But what's so
Yeah.
important is that you just, and then let's talk about a couple of the pieces in the few minutes I have here. But the really important thing is the story that we've just spent a lot of time talking about, because a lot of people need to hear this, I think, about persistence, about knowing that somehow, this is going to be so, that it's an important part of both your lives and then making it happen. So here we are with your first, let's call it your first CD, okay? Your
Okay.
first commercial CD. I salute you right away just for that
Thank
alone,
you.
just for that, because I know, we all know who do CDs. That was 2-3 year process. Well,
Well, about two.
about two.
About, yeah.
That's enough.
But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of.
And this is not. Well, let's just talk about that, and then but before I leave, I want to talk about the glass flute. But first, let's just have a look. I'm just going to kind of browse some of my notes here. There are some beauties on this CD. The three partitas, the David Noon piece is marvelous. Preludio, the Musette, the Pastoral, Rigaudon 4. Sorry, but I put some like 14,000 little X's after Jerry Owen's Meshquanawate, this red-tailed hawk piece. It's everything that it sounds like it should be in terms of that flute sound, that Native American kind of flute sound, that ethic, composed in 1995. This is really a wonderfully thoughtful piece. How do you guys feel about Jerry Owen's Meshquanawate?
We like it a lot. In fact,
It's
we
a
like
beauty.
Gary Owen's music a lot. We're getting ready to do a residency with him for 15 days. Turns out he grew up in the Miller Beach area, which is also right on Lake Michigan.
Part of Gary, Indiana.
Yeah, it's part of Gary, right? And we didn't even know this Meshquanawata. When we found the piece, we were looking for Indiana connected composers because in 2016 we did a whole 3 concert series, if you can imagine, 3 concert series, and everything was Indiana connected to celebrate Indiana's bicentennial. Okay, so we were looking for these Indiana connections. And I saw that Jerry Owen, when I was doing composer research, he had gone to school in Indiana. He had gone to DePauw in Greencastle. Well, so I wrote to him. He says, yes, dear, that's not my only Indiana connection. I was actually born and raised in Miller Beach, which is, like Paul said, it's right in Gary. It's just a 30-minute drive from where we are. And it turned out he's written a lot of music for flute and classical guitar, and as you heard, he writes beautifully, genre beautifully, and this piece was never recorded. Couldn't believe it, and the same thing with the Noon piece. That now David Noon's piece, we toured it all over Asia and Europe, back in our first iteration, and always loved that piece.
Actually, most everything on here. I'm looking at Mark Millet's. I got 3 big checks out of that. 2 pieces for flute and guitar from 2000, especially. Well, actually, the whole thing is the elegy for Lefty is.
Oh yeah,
gorgeous.
it's gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
It sort of reminds you of the second movement of the Concerto del Arnwes. There's certain the strum chords, the lush melodies. Mark has 2 really, in my view, talents in his guitar writing. And I know his guitar writing from a series of American folk songs. He wrote, did an arrangement of a couple folk songs, and he can write these lush guitar chords And then in the first movement, his second, his most probably prominent feature is this driving sort of minimalist type of fast
Rhythm.
rhythmic force, and every time you hear his music, you just it just is so tight because people are really into it, and it just is very exciting. It's not like Philip Glass or it's a lot
Now be
a
careful.
different level. It's a different level of minimalism. It's not quite. I mean, Glass and Phil and Steve Reich are okay, but I think Mellot's takes it to a whole different level. I really.
Yeah, it is apples and oranges. If
It
we're
is.
talking about a certain thing called minimalism, I love the driving repetitive rhythm, that is contagious
Yes.
sense of rhythm. Um,
Yeah. That's his
so
feature, one of his features, and the lush guitar chords in the second movement that accompanied the
The flute line.
incredible flute writing.
and how is that writing? Did it was it hard to put that piece together, or
Oh,
just
yeah,
Well, the
in the
first
first
movement
movement.
is like death by eighth note. If you if you drop an eighth note, it's all over. You
Yeah,
know?
we needed
you
a
mean
click.
fast? You mean
Yeah,
really
Yeah, fast.
fast? Yeah.
Yes, the
if we
movement
do
fast.
it when we do it live, we do have click tracks and we have
Ah, really?
the Bluetooth ear thing, and we'll have it hooked up. Yeah, of course,
Huh?
because it just I think to have a pulsating eighth note behind you, and Mark was kind enough to make this demo of the where that listed where the accents and where the changes in the time
Nice.
meters are, and so you
Time
just
saving.
gotta get used to working with that and then bringing it together. And so we're wearing headphones or we'll have a Bluetooth thing and we're doing it on stage. It's really comical, but it's kind of necessary. It's just that kind of a piece that we like that extra level of assurance.
Huh, that's very interesting. You have divulged that to me. I will
Yeah.
make a note.
Well, we experimented even back in our old days with electronics and things. We made an arrangement of Ravel's Bolero where I recorded all the parts on all the various string instruments, mandolin, banjo, electric guitar, acoustic, steel string guitar, classical
Flute,
guitar.
yeah.
She played all the flutes.
I played all the
We
flutes.
we just made the parts and we just played the solo lines on stage with this amazing orchestration of
Of us.
bolero of us on guitars and flutes,
That's
and
the way.
we did that. So it's the electronics is the way of the future. Playing. I've done a lot of electronic, acoustic, electric things, and but this requires a click track in my view unless we go out and tour it and play it 100 times. We might get it right
But
without
Yeah,
that's very
100 performances would fix
of
it.
another 100 performances of it.
100 live performances.
but
100
that's a
live.
very revealing, a very interesting little trick
Yep.
that you've just disclosed. I mean, Sharifi, hope I'm pronouncing the name again properly. Duets exhibition. I mean, this 2016 piece, now we're pushing, the CD gets closer and closer to the here and now. 2016, what do we got? One, two, three, four. We got four
Four
little wonderful,
miniatures.
pleasant, beautiful little miniatures. Thank you very much. Murdered in His Labyrinth, I remember, is the last one that sets clearly a narrative of some kind, and that's what's intriguing when composers can grab the listener and bring them into a narrative, even if the listener is going, I know that a story's going on here, but I don't know what.
Well, that's the thing with this piece. He decided that he'll throw all kinds of poetry, art, anything, and it doesn't matter. It's just expression.
Ah,
So he had no message. He had no artistic idea. He just called it all expression.
Mhm.
And the things that inspired him to write the movements are all based on different things. There's a James Joyce quote that he's doing. There's the first movement with these paintings and so on, and there's no relation to it. It's
Right.
just art for art's sake.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
kind of
Mhm.
his view, and that's how he wrote it. Was he's gonna not have a connection at all to the material that he's inspired by.
Right.
Yeah, and that is very
Exactly.
interesting. I've
Yeah,
he's not the first composer, but
because
it's
everyone
so,
wants to
so
be
interesting that
inspired.
and quite deliberate.
Yeah.
That making that kind of choice. I'm running rapidly beyond
Oh,
time, so but I can't let this conversation end without discussing Jorge Munez, South Shore Suite, because South Shore is your neck of the woods. Yes.
Right. Kind of our signature piece. Yeah.
Okay, so the signature piece. Let me just run by the movements a little bit, just the names, and then you can kind of give us all an overview of South Shore, what that is. I'm in California, South Shore. Okay, Princess Mishawaka, I presume that's a legendary princess from the Midwest lands and Native Americans. Mount Baldy, Lake Michigan, Diana of the Dunes. There's got to be a story there. And by the way, blowing the tune over the mouthpiece, that wonderful whispering sound. I love that. Diana of the Dunes. And then Dillinger's Run. And then Epilogue, Chicago. Tell both of you live in that stretch of the country, yeah, nearby, right? This is
That's the South Shore of Lake Michigan.
yeah,
That's
South. That's where I
literally where
grew up.
Paul grew up, and it's a metaphorical journey
mm,
on that train between South Bend and Chicago. And these are just some of the iconic landmarks or legends of the region that the composer chose. We just said we wanted a piece kind of connected to the dunes, connected to the South Shore of Lake Michigan, and we wanted it to be multi-movement work. Other than that, we didn't give him any real uh,
so
parameters.
you commissioned this piece, did you?
Yes, we
You commissioned.
commissioned it for Indiana's bicentennial in 2016.
But he got all the inspiration. He was daily riding the train from South Bend or Mishawaka, where he lives. He's a professor at IU South Bend. To Chicago, he had a little apartment, and he would hole himself up because he had an
He had an opera
opera
to write.
and a big commission. And so he was getting ideas at the same time for our piece during his travels on the South Shore commuter train.
And by the
And
way, it just occurred to me. I have a friend who lives in South Bend. Not a friend, but a woman that joined me on a trip to Cuba about 3 summers ago. And this very day, this is what I love about Facebook. She's babysitting her nieces and nephews or something. The train ride from South Bend to Chicago. She took the
Oh,
kids into Chicago. So I mean, I thought about this
she
today.
took the South Shore, Dan.
she
That's
took
how
the
she,
South Shore
that's the
train.
train
And
she
that's
took. She took the South Shore.
and she's mentioned it before,
Yep.
just the idea of going into Chicago from South Bend, and sure enough, that's obviously the
Yep.
route that so many millions of people know. So people will instant, oh, Mount Baldy, I remember seeing Mount Baldy from out the windows, that kind of thing. How much you say this is your signature piece just because it's South Shore? I mean,
I think because I mean, it's the same, it's the region where
It's
we're
tied to this
based.
yeah.
It's
region.
tied to this region.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
by the way, one
It's
other
tied.
thing, and then we have to leave. This will be the longest one so far, so we'll see. I need to offer rewards for people that sit through the whole thing. And let me just reassure you, people love the videos. The videos are very, very important. Viewers get very, very engaged. So far I haven't had any complaints, but we're going to end it. I promise everybody. But what I want to know is a little something about careers, ambitions, home, a sense of place. In other words, some people, I talk to a lot of them, are 100%, high active, big careers in the big cities, and the energy is, intense and all of that. Others, I live in Santa Barbara. I'm pretty mellow myself, frankly, but others make choices. You two have made a choice, have you not, to live happily in this part of Indiana, make music in your region for your people, for your community. Have I got that right? And of course, you're going to do a little
Well,
traveling and a little touring, but
right. Well, Paul's in South Carolina. That's where he's living
oh, I
full
keep
time.
forgetting. So he's
Right,
just here to.
right.
Ah. ruined
But
my whole theory.
in terms of the arts though, and the culture, I think where he's living in Spartanburg, they have a very well established arts audience and music audience, and there's a lot of culture that's there. In this region where I'm living and where he grew up, we don't have it. It's not that well established. It's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit in recent years, and we would like to see this area develop more as a cultural destination. You know, it has these neat geographical features. The Indiana Dunes has just been named a national park. It's our nation's 61st national park right here. It's right where Paul grew up. It's a 15-minute drive from my house. And so we think it's a destination. This area is a destination, and we want to see it be a cultural destination. And we've always been about like connecting to audiences. That's just kind of been our shtick.
And there's something about what most of us take for granted. I'm a Spokane boy, so Spokane's a pretty decent-sized city. You know, it's not a big city, and it has, excuse me, it has those brick buildings still.
Mm-hmm.
And that my fantasy has always been about the Midwest and the little towns with the brick buildings, you know, from the turn of the last century, from the 19 teens and so on. So I'm charmed, at least in my head, I'm charmed already by just the idea of what the Midwest is. Flat,
We
small
were
towns.
playing regularly in a opera house that was built
Oh, you
in
mentioned.
1893. Well, they just had their 125th anniversary, so we'd have to do the math. But yeah, it's like I think they're 125th.
You know, we
125
And
years
these
old.
buildings are all over the place in little towns all over the Midwest. And we must all remember that the Midwest boomed at the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century. Big cities, Muncie, Oshkosh. These were all going to be the great cities of the world. You know, so there's that remnant. These incredible buildings, beautiful antiques. It reminds me of New England. Wonderful little opera houses in every little town. So the point is well taken. You of course you have your job, Paul. So you go back to South. Is it South Carolina?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. But this is your home zone, and so you're connected to it. And when you can, you're here. So
Absolutely.
there is a function.
Yeah, I have family here. I mean, it's still home.
And this will be retirement. Yeah, when the time comes.
Am
I in trouble yet?
Nobody's retiring. Who's retiring?
I realized I was in trouble the minute I said that because I'm thinking, hey, I'm 71. I'm not, they're gonna take me kicking and screaming to the nursing home.
I know. I think I like the winters in South Carolina better than the up north.
Yeah.
Well spoken. There's from a true Indianan.
But yeah.
Yeah, they can be a little harsh here. I mean, they can be a lot harsh here.
A lot harsh. Okay.
A lot harsh. Well, there were several days there where our air temperature was colder than the air temperature in Alaska. It just got really, really cold here.
That's harsh. Okay, enough of this. Climate is indeed changing. I have had a great talk. We're going to have to end a wonderful talk with flutist Deborah Silvert and guitarist Paul Bowman. We did not have a chance to speak about your glass flute, but give me a quick date, and is this maybe something about another CD coming up? Tell me a little bit about the glass flute.
It is. It's an 1816 four-keyed lead crystal flute made by Claude Laurent in Paris. And very, very rare. There's only about 150 of these existing in the world. About 40 of them are privately held, and there's only 4 people that own them and actually play on them publicly, although somebody just posted a YouTube video. I think the flute that he's playing belongs to a museum. I'm not sure about that, but he's an excellent player, Peter Bloom.
Question?
Yes.
Am I wrong, or do I remember that your husband husband involved? Hello.
He bought it. He bought it for me. We went to Washington, D.C. to see the Dayton C. Miller flute collection at the Library of Congress back in 1987. And I fell so in love with the 17 Claude Laurent crystal flutes that they have there. It's the largest collection of them in one place in the world. One of them is President James Madison's crystal flute. Yeah. And my husband said, I'm going to get you one someday. So it took him it took him about a decade.
What a
Yeah,
mensch,
about a
as you say.
decade.
What a mensch.
Well, over a decade. I think it was about 12 years, but he put feelers out with antique flute dealers all over the world and or people who dealt in antique musical instruments and said he wanted to buy one
And
of those.
are you looking at maybe making use of this glass flute on a wonderful, very special CD in the
Yes,
future? Because I know it's
yeah.
about raising money and
Yep.
paying the,
He's
you know,
spitting throat
Yeah, we had
already.
one piece that we commissioned for it already. It'll be new music for this old flute.
Gary Shocker.
Gary Shocker wrote a piece for us already.
Yes.
Right. And we're going to call it, I think we're going to call it, yes, it's a fragile thing.
Ah, that's a beautiful idea. That's a great idea. And by the way, I've seen the pictures because the picture of the flute is on your website.
Right. Yes.
So,
Check it out.
and I'm gonna, as you know, I'm gonna point everybody at your website and everything. Whenever you put anything up of interest on Facebook, I will share it with everyone under the sun. I promise I'll have a review of the CD, but do not hold your breath. I'm
Okay.
that far behind. I'm not holding my breath, that's for sure. But the point is, it's fine because I'll throw out a whole new batch of publicity when I get the review up. So, you know, it's
Exactly.
win-win. Deborah Silver, guitarist Paul Bowman, many thanks for giving me some time there in Indiana, Valparaiso, Indiana, and you're doing good things for both yourselves and for your community. Hello, I think that's important. So I'm glad you shared this story with me. It's very important. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye bye.